The name is Paine. Thomas Paine. Not Tom, as me detractors say. But the kindest thing they did say. Just let me untangle these foul sheets and twine in these withered legs, and I should tell a cautionary tale. What befalls a successful revolutionary. I'd been famous and infamous and learned the difference. Found in Father John Adams, called the 30 years of me prime, the age of Paine. Sounds flattering, until he appended the age of death and destruction. Powerful men did not fault themselves for bloody rebellion. They blamed me. Whilst audiences fall in love with Shakespearean tales, I wrote to enlighten, and I experienced what no man had before. In bookstores, cafes, and pubs, in every colony, country, and language, people would loudly proclaim, "We have the power within us to make the world over again." And more, it is the aim of political association to realize human rights. Plus, the world is me country, all mankind are me brethren, and to do good is me religion. And this, men did not make the earth, it is their improvements that are one's possessions. Every owner owes to his community a ground rent, and every resident is owed a rent share. Opinions of impressionable youth? Nay, I penned those lines in the second half of life, and they made of me, a staymaker's son, a celebrity, and a target. Governments of England, France, and America all sought me demise. Death courted me 7 times, and I escaped 6. Not bad for a troublesome wordsmith. I became the creator of America, or the corrupter. There is some dispute. Lately, my ears have been burning. Congress's House Committee on Communications presents the prestigious Thomas Paine Award. Never heard that word tied to my name. A newspaper in the nation's capital recommends reading Tom Paine for political guidance. Let me save you the trouble. Do whatever makes living beings happy. When mentioning me, at least know who I was. At least know what cost we founders paid, so that you waste not our sacrifice. When the British blockaded Boston, the Continental Congress permitted American seamen to attack English shipping. John Paul Jones, the father of our Navy, hated this licensing of privateers, as sailors would forego naval service. The freebooters' term is shorter, they attack unarmed merchant ships, and they reap richer rewards. They did not take prisoners, being too bothersome to ransom. But they did let the sailors swim home. Long ago, I freebooted. Life at sea had to be better than life on land. My natal village in England endured want. Our Lord enclosed common lands, forcing some neighbours into the poorhouse, others into highway robbery. Every month of me childhood, from me bedroom window, I witnessed an hanging. Some even of boys for stealing a penny, even of his dog if her load felt peevish. Bewildered and unwarranted, or how could a child cope? As an adolescent, which is to say a fool, I heard me parents be running off to sea. At the dock, me father begged me to stay. I yielded. Weeks later, one privateer who had survived recounted how the French had slaughtered the rest of his crew. Father assumed his point had been won. I felt mine had adventure. I fought French merchant marines for their cargo. My first brush with death, nothing noble at all. Splattered I was with another man's blood. Our captain commended me. I never re-enlisted. Age 20, in 1757, I took my share of the booty to Grand London. The rich and hearty in carriages, past the poor and sickly on foot. Unwary pedestrians were disgraced by housekeepers dumping filth from upstairs windows. When the city's water ran short, no more than once or twice a week, citizens rioted. At plazas with wells, they crowned one another with buckets, and walking sticks became clubs, and hats, wigs, and wooden teeth went flying. Like Quick Jack, I'd nimbly duck into a doorway. Still, London was where thousands wanted to be. I frequented London's coffee houses, way poor outside, read the headlines pasted in the window, then dared to enter. Oh, that rich aroma, that savory beverage by itself now justified Europe's imperial designs. And the pubs, the atmosphere, smoky and congenial with fine Virginia tobacco. We laughed and sang. Yankee Doodle Dandy was favored. Most patrons deplored the Crown's abusing our colonial cousins. Even worse, American privateers disrupted trade. Economic losses too turned Englishmen against the subjugation of the colonists. Despite political strife, optimism arose. Lively minds pushed the boundaries of knowledge. In one lecture hall, I met inventor John Bird. His sextant enabled seamen to navigate out of sight of land, even among heavenly bodies, which the better behaved among you may do someday. In talks, evangelicals interrupted loudly, inviting all to join their utopias. I like their singing, but otherwise keep my distance. America gained a plenty true believers, whilst England ran a shortage, forever changing the character of both nations, I wager. Poor unsaved England. The lectures, books, conversations were enlightening, but the booty not everlasting. Returned to me village, I breeded stays for ships. To alleviate the day's drudgery, I skated. People called me Commodore for me flare on ice, or for me stint at sea. Misdeeds I tried to forget. On a glistening pond, I met the answer to a young man's fancy. Our sweet beauty quieted me remorse. Our wintry play blossomed into marriage. A perfect union of body and soul, until me debt became due. Bearing our stillborn son, Mary's blood soaking our bed, I, the helpless husband, held her hand. Mary did not know it. The midwife gave us privacy. I wiped Mary's brow, arranged her features, smoothed away the mask of pain. Must she and babe die to pay for me piracy? 'Twas an hard business, but one licensed by the king. Next to a deaf god. Death in childbirth was not uncommon. Still, I could not endure it. In 1767, 30 years old, I had a job that made little money and fewer friends. Smugglers who brought in goods from America were more popular than excisemen who took money for the king. The cold shoulders of taxpayers worried me until I re-entered into matrimony. Elizabeth could match wits with anyone. However, she not so much gained an husband as lost a father. He was a fellow free thinker. Cats and a dog had run of his tavern. Our deep discussings and hosting of guests made the pub popular, but left Elizabeth ordering, tidying up, and collecting overdue debts from friends. As I could not start a family on my taxman's salary, my father-in-law urged me to write a petition to impress the king. Impress indeed it did. The Royal Commission on Taxation fired me. Elizabeth, tethered to an unemployed husband, asked for a divorce, and her well-meaning father died, seemingly for guilt. Distraught, I turned again to London, an intellectual salve for my emotional turmoil. Unlucky in love. With that petition, I'd shown skill in raising. Renaissance men invited others of intelligence, including us lowborn, to their salons. One such invitation altered me life forever. Whilst relishing turkey, tomatoes, or chocolate, Europe owes this virgin continent so much. The world's most clever inventor, bifocals came from his lively mind. And I began a rapport. Cherubic Ben Franklin, toast of the town, and I would analyze the mysteries of human nature, buzzing only when Ben, master of electricity, was attracted to a damsel, mistress of magnetism. Born ordinary, like myself, Ben made himself extraordinary. One could do that in the new world. In the old world, talent goes to waste. I should remain a tutor of noble rascals and grow a hunchback from Bowen so much, Ben warned. But already in my late 30s, to leave London and begin a new one, a colony? Still slightly desperate and overly optimistic, I took Ben's advice and letter of introduction and left behind all that I knew. I arrived in Philadelphia dead, save for one final breath or two. My second close call, and like me first, aboard ship. Typhus took 6 on that ocean crossing. Laid out on the dock like unconscious freight, I was destined for a pauper's grave. 2 seamen were already claiming me boots. I should have kicked them had I not been comatose. The skipper interrupted their scavenging and had them search me. They found this, naming me an arguer extraordinaire, nevertheless an asset to humanity. Never missed an opportunity to jest, did he? Please welcome him to America. Signed, Benjamin Franklin, Esquire. Ben, author of the ever-useful Poor Richard's Almanac, was the colonial envoy to the court of King George III. That piece of paper saved me life. Doubled it, actually, for which I am thankful. The skipper immediately had his men carry me to the home of Ben's daughter, warmed by his Franklin stove. There, Ben's physician restored me to health, taking 6 months to do so. Back again among the living, I found Philadelphia, my new hometown, to be clean and busy. People thrived. Unlike London, it lacked beggars and whores. Verily, a new world. However, the city of brotherly love was not loving to all. The view from my bedroom window, reminiscent of the scaffold of my childhood, showed Africans on the auction block. Offended, I organized the Anti-Slavery Society. One of its Quaker members, Robert Aitken, dressed as a deacon, and inquired in his Scottish accent as to my qualifications for editing. I replied, though not actually a journalist, relevant experience had sharpened my faculties, brought them to a fine edge, I assured him. My father-in-law's parish was edified by my sermons. His tradesmen's club crowned me debater of the year, and that petition for a livable wage had garnered me entry into London's literati. Unintentionally, I had prepared myself for wordsmithing. Aitken hired me to edit his magazine, the Pennsylvanian, at twice the pay in England. I could have a cat, or wife if such sparks flew. Employers in the New World had little choice. Pay a man too little, he went west and began a farm. Paid fairly, everyone lived well. Amazing what that does for a man's morale. Aitken wanted news from England. I delivered the views of this Englishman. If hereditary rulers are necessary, then also hereditary mathematicians. Americans debated enthusiastically. Barcape Sam Adams ranted recklessly. Quartering British troops in private homes, trials lacking juries, taxation without representation, nay! Swinging his mug, he anointed his audience. They roared their approval, not minding their ripe bouquet. With each issue, I voiced dissent, eliciting Aitken's ire, until his magazine sold out throughout the colonies, whilst others went bankrupt. Mikautis' boss was nicely dumbstruck. Returned home from London, Ben introduced me to the Congress. Sam Adams, a smallish man, would drone on whilst Ben leaned on his cane in exasperation. One handsome upstart, Alexander Hamilton, bustled about, making himself useful to the powerful in any way he could. Evenings in Philadelphia's pubs, we told stories and poked fun, Ben the wittiest amongst us. There, we reached more accords than during the day at the State House, arguing and negotiating, Ben noted, leaning on me shoulder as we shambled home. Lawyer Adams was an enigma. He made us wonder if personalities could split. He had defended the British troops who committed the Boston Massacre, yet penned an argument for rebellion. By my calculations, perhaps 4 delegates had read Adams's opaque tract to its welcome end. The case for independence demanded plain English. Hence, in 1776, I published Common Sense, citing the evils of the British Empire. Keeping up with demand proved impossible. In all, Aitken calculated hundreds of thousands sold in a sparse country, half illiterate. Me pen fell from me hand. Reaching for a glass of water, I nearly drank from me inkwell. 'Twere dizzying times. None more caught up it than I. Aroused readers waving copies beleaguered their representatives to aid its call. Ben, a former loyalist, as were George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, praised its logic. Jefferson, tall as I, but more handsome, was a man of science. He'd pull from his pocket his invention, a tiny orb that told time. A free thinker, Thomas invited me to edit the Declaration of Independence that he had penned. It was treason, bringing down upon us the wrath of the king. The odds of defeating the mighty British Empire were long and the task daunting. Should we fail, The rich would lose their fortunes, and all of us our lives. The State House boiled with debate, until Ben noted we should all hang together or hang separately. Most delegates, save for some businessmen, added their names to our declaration. I called this new nation the United States of America. Loyalties divided families. Some saw themselves as citizens of a country, others subjects of a king. Ben lost a son, thus, never to see him again. John Adams nominated George Washington to command an army based solely on stature, applying literally the phrase command in height. I gladly donated my royalties to the war effort. This perked up Robert Morris, the wealthiest man in America, with a billionaires to prove it. That scoundrel would sell to Congress at inflated prices arms that proved deadly to the user. Ben and Thomas had Congress appoint May Foreign Secretary. A welcome post, it paid a salary. My first assignment was to persuade the tribes, foreigners to colonials, not to side with Britain. It was risky, but I found brotherhood, not enmity. The natives and I shared novelties, skills, values, and we smoked the pace pipe. We both saw men belonging to the earth and not the earth to men. Indians lived freer than we whites. Upon my re-entry to Congress, Adams and Hamilton seemed surprised to see me. Nearly made me feel I owed them an apology for returning safely. I decided to surprise them with my diligence. As Foreign Secretary, I read correspondence from foreign nations. One letter detailed a plot to defraud the Treasury. Washington advised me to keep quiet, let the Treasurer reject the sham bill. My sense of propriety was not appeased. Our betters are not better. Was not ours a revolution of ideals? Thomas and Ben successfully tamed me outspokenness, usually, but I revealed this plot. Rather than punish the culprits, Congress, that baiting art of rebellion, fired me for my rewarding job. And with John Adams casting the tie-breaking vote, annulled me pension. One swindler even sent ruffians to get me a thumping, but this ex-privateer scattered them. Ben chided me good-naturedly for me naivete. I found refuge staying with his relatives. It was a relief, playing with children and escaping adults, save for one. Sadie and I took long walks on country roads, telling jokes and bumping elbows. With war clouding the future, she did not want to waste time. Don't dally, Cupid Ben advised. Yet would I bring her suffering as I had done others? Undecided in romance, I returned to revolution. A glorious term for an inglorious business. Washington, young James Monroe, the Marquis de Lafayette, ill-fated John Lawrence, and I became friends, the lone positive development. But our soldiers were poorly equipped, poorly fed, ragged, frazen, fate-laden in the snow, and me royalties never reached the army. With morale as low as desertions were high, the public was ready to call it quits. As I had written common sense to get us into war, I now wrote the American crisis to keep us at war. Seated at a tom-tom drum in our miserable camp, I penned such lines as, "These are the times that try men's souls." Lafayette tried reading it to the troops, but conviction worsened his accent. Washington ended it to Monroe. His pure voice made weary veterans weep. Turned resolute, the words I'd penned. They soldiered on. Some of them never returned to farming. Some of them never returned at all. Delivering me reports, I discovered that our new nation's capital was wherever Congress met. Our eminent legislators fleeing the British Army, Frost here with Jefferson gone governing Virginia and Ben overseas cajoling the French, had developed a talent for rapid packing and hasty departure. Mail writers had trouble finding them. I suggested they try New Jersey. In 1777, at 40 years old, I usually traveled on foot. That winter, with snow dampening the clop of hooves, a British patrol nearly captured me. I barely made it into the woods. My third brush with death. The redcoats would have surely hanged me, and without trial or second thought. The British torched entire towns, all of Portland. Some financiers lost all that they had and died penniless. As a percentage of the population, our rebellion killed more Americans than any war since. Was it worth it? Nothing positive to report idled me pen. Worried, Washington paid me to revive American crisis, which had rivaled common sense for its effect upon readers. But battles are not won by inspirational words alone. Our troops needed food and munitions. And with Congress broke and defeat looming, our only hope was aid from Britain's usual enemy, France. The French king must hear our case, even in the rudimentary French. Naturally, Adams and Hamilton vetoed me going. But their envoy, John Lawrence, invited me, if I could pay me way. Crossing the ocean, Admiral Jones sailed close to icebergs where British warships dared not go. Near in Europe, we attacked a British privateer towing a captured Venetian merchant ship. The fast swordplay on board conjured me callous youthful adventuring. What the common sailor fights for are crumbs beside what the French king partakes daily at gilded Versailles. And the fluttering ladies, no wonder Ben loved conducting diplomacy there. We sampled a new drink from the Widow Clicquot. If you try her champagne, sip it. It made me sneeze. Our rustic ways amuse the worldly Franklin. But Ben led us to Louis XVI. Nigh tall as I, but more stout. How could he not be dining in that sumptuous palace? Louis, my son would have been about his age, found me mashing of his lovely language amusing, and me interest in his fond hobby of locksmithing affirming. A kindred spirit in all things mechanical, Louis gave me a key. It opened a treasure chest. But before we could sail home in triumph, Robert Morris presented his credentials and confiscated the gold. Likely I am more casual toward beadledom than the proper Lawrence, but it was John's mission. Besides, Morris had to deposit the doubloons in the National Bank we'd established to safeguard public funds, and in which I had entrusted me entire life savings. But Hamilton made Morris bank president, and Morris made his partners trustees. They loaned themselves the gold and used it to buy the bank. War brings out bravery in some, rapacity in others. But the gold and the French Navy turned the tide. Hamilton left Congress to join Washington at Yorktown to experience mortal combat before hostilities ceased. To mock their surrender, the British troops whistled, "The world turned upside down." Our representatives in Britain took years to sign a peace treaty, perhaps because they met in Paris, a city whose many delights lure men from their purposes. I pictured John Adams taking long walks in dampening rain. During the delay, John Lawrence was killed whilst returning home. One more senseless tragedy. Virtuous John. He stood by me in the field and in Congress. Was that God's plan? Once Lawrence had received French gold, his purpose was finished. At last, it was over. A treaty was signed. John Adams had the grace to say, "If not for the pen of Paine, the sword of Washington would have been wielded in vain." Mark that, a lawyer's honesty. Washington marched to New York, which, due to its evening balls, had been the British Army's favorite city. Washington, Hamilton, Monroe, Lafayette, and I paraded Broadway, hailed as heroes. Americans were deliriously happy their dream future had arrived. If one day was as if in heaven, it was that. Until I caught sight of Sadie and Shay of May. At first I thought the stars had not realigned, but Shay was with her new husband. We parted friends, our eyes intimate regret. I wondered if together we'd have known happiness. Jocelyn brought me back. Men, women, children shook me hand, patted me back, recited me lines. They ignored the ilk of Robert Morris, who glared at me. I laughed. Though I'd lost it love, the world was becoming more enlightened and just. Briefly. The more popular I became with common men, the less popular I became with gentlemen. I wasn't worried. Ben, ever the father to me only died whilst we rebelled, warned I underestimated the degree to which war inures a man to the letting of blood, especially if seeking vengeance. The rapacious brooked no opposition. Hamilton's clique met in secret to rend the Articles of Confederation. Rentier Governor Morris, no relation to Robert Morris, but equally covetous, began their new constitution well. Weigh the people, but he meant his sort. Those delegates deleted the public recovery of land value, making land an even fatter plum to pluck. Soon, the schemes of speculators became preposterous. Seduced by the lure of something for nothing, even Ben lost all that he had to Robert Morris. When asked, Ben said, "We'd created a republic if we could keep it." Can you?